Should you use textbooks to learn your target language? This is the question that I asked myself a number of times. And I went on the internet, like many people do, on Reddit, on YouTube, on different websites, and I searched this question and I got these answers, which now, years later, don't really seem to click with the reality of language learning. My name is North. This is my channel, North and His Books, where we talk about learning languages. And in this video, I want to talk to you about a couple reasons why some of the reviews of textbooks that you might see on the internet, especially on YouTube at the very least, might not reflect whether or not textbooks are right for you to learn the language that you want to learn. So if you go right now on YouTube and you type in, "Are textbooks useful for languages?" you're going to get a number of videos, big list of people with tens or hundreds of thousands of subscribers with many views, where they essentially say, for the most part, and I'm not speaking about everyone, that textbooks are useless. Time and time again, you have these people saying essentially that they learn their language not by solving exercises at the back of a book or by reading grammar rules one after another, but instead by living in the language. The reality is that this may not be useful advice for the average person out there. The first reason I can give you why they may not have the same point of view as a regular language learner has is simply that these people, with all their subscribers and all their supporters, are people that spend an inordinate amount of time on language learning. So if you have 14 languages in your arsenal and you spend 8 hours a day learning or maintaining all your languages, you're going to have a very different perspective on what's right or what's wrong, in the same way that a professional basketball or hockey player might have a very different perspective on how to improve someone's game compared to, I don't know, a little league coach. The average person out there who wants to learn a language is a full-time student or a nurse if they have free time, or an engineer or a lawyer, and they're coming home from work at 6:30 and they're tired and they got 17 kids in the kitchen that need to be fed, and they just want to learn Spanish or German or whatever it is. And they're being given advice by people who dedicate their entire lives to learning many languages, but not a little bit of their lives to learning a single one. If you're on your 9th language, then at a certain point, yes, you can start to skip many of the basic concepts or rules that you'll see in a textbook. For example, I speak Spanish and Italian and French to a decent level, and I could, if I wanted to, start learning Catalan. And if I were to do so, I would already have a huge leg up on someone who is, for example, I don't know, Japanese, who doesn't speak any Romance language, who wants to learn Catalan. So yes, to a certain extent, would I need to buy a $100 textbook and go through all the problems one by one to understand how the present, future, or past tense works in such a language? No, because I have so much exposure to languages in general and also to Romance languages in particular that I can sort of skip through many of that. But for the average person, they don't speak a whole bunch of languages, and they do have to go through every single rule one by one to get to a basic understanding of the grammar. Another reason why some of these people online might not be giving you the best advice for your language learning journey is essentially that their job is to learn languages. And then you have to ask yourself, how do they get paid? There's no government agency that's out there paying them because they speak 8 languages. They get paid from views. They get paid from, I don't know, Patreon or whatever it is, or from selling out subscriptions to certain apps. And it's in their benefit for people to think that language learning is something that is difficult, mysterious, maybe even mystical. The reality, perhaps, that learning languages does come down to a lot of boring repetition, focus on learning difficult and sometimes very complicated rules, reduces their ability to entertain you with different ways or strategies they have to learn languages. So they can talk about how they go to supermarkets and how they talk to people off the cuff in the middle of the street, and that's how they practice their languages, even though for most people it can be more useful to simply sit down with a textbook and go through it page by page. When I learned German, I used a series of textbooks called Menschen from the A1 to the B1 level, and every single chapter was the same. It was 4 pages in the course book. It had an introductory page with a topic or an idea for you to discuss. It had a series of new words that you had to learn, and it had a single grammatical concept and the rules for that. For example, der, das, die, in German. And that meant that I was able to itemize every single aspect of the grammar of the early process of learning German into a series of small blocks. And then I would go in the workbook, the other half of the textbook, and I would solve all those problems one by one. Where do I put der? Where do I put das? And so on. And I would slowly learn, and that's how I got to a decent level. If someone told me at the time when I was first learning German that I could simply, use sort of vague concepts for how you simply need to start talking without having any basic background in the language whatsoever, it may have been rather enticing because this would give me the idea that I could skip a lot of the hard work and sweat that I put into learning the language. But the reality was that I got to where I was in German because I spent a lot of hours bent over a textbook with a pencil and an eraser, solving questions one by one and then looking up the answers to see if I got them correct. And that you can imagine any number of people in your country where you live who emigrated there 20 years ago, and yet still today they don't particularly speak very well simply because they never put any effort into learning the grammar and the basic rules of the language. They simply got a job and started speaking, and they never really had many people correct their mistakes, and here they still are. So some of these people selling language learning tips and strategies and secrets to make you jump ahead of the queue perhaps aren't acting in good faith, in that a textbook as an alternative to their YouTube channel can provide competition, so they don't want you to think that you can use textbooks too much to learn it. And finally, the last reason why some people are against textbooks, and this is something that I find rather odd, but I can understand it in some situations. Usually textbooks cost money. You can obviously pirate some things, but you can pirate a lot of things, and at that point the conversation changes completely. But if someone tells you, yeah, I have a way of learning a language and it requires you to spend $100 on a book and a workbook, a lot of people on the internet don't want to spend $1, and they think that they can learn a language to proficiency without spending $1. It's certainly possible in general, and it has been done, but if your goal is to reduce the number of hours you spend on the learning process, and for learning a language that is a huge number of hours, you're going to find that spending a bit of money here and there actually allows you to save a lot of effort. And $100 spent on a good textbook might mean you can buy one less video game, or I don't know, whatever you spend your money on, but in the long run it probably actually saves you a lot more time and work and effort in the future. So when are textbooks good? Off the top of my head, learning languages that are both Germanic, well, I've learned Germanic, Romance, and Slavic languages. Overall, the harder the grammar, the more I benefited from the book. I live in a French-speaking region, and when I did take group classes and use textbooks to learn Italian, I did benefit from the use of the textbook, but perhaps not to the same degree as I benefited from using a German textbook to learn German, because the grammar is quite a bit harder, and also because I had less exposure to all the rules, because, well, French is so much more similar to Italian than English is to German, grammar-wise. Even more, when I learned Russian, I found that I had a huge benefit from going through, I actually use a German textbook for learning Russian called Отлично. I found there was a huge benefit to one by one learning every single case and when it's applied and how you decline all the different words and adjectives and so on. It was immensely complicated for my Anglophone brain, but it made a huge difference. So if I had to make a recommendation as someone who, I have about -2 subscribers, I have clearly no horse in this race, this isn't what I do for a living, it would be that the best time to use a textbook is when the grammar of the target language is really foreign and complicated to you. Thank you very much. Subscribe for more videos like this.